Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing my 1,000 subscriber Q&A. So I just recently hit 1,000 subscribers. Yay, I'm so excited. And I really wanted to celebrate with you guys, and so I asked how you would like to celebrate. In the poll, the two options that were super close were live reading sprints and a Q&A. Like, they were only a couple of percent differences. So I decided to do them both. I have already done my live reading sprints and I'll link that in case you want to watch it. It was a really fun time and some reading happened, but a lot of conversation happened too. And then I decided I'd go ahead and do a Q&A also. I did a Q&A when I hit 500 subscribers, and that was in January of this year. So I'll link that one. Also tried not to duplicate questions that I know were asked in that Q&A, although there might still be some crossover because I didn't exactly go back and watch it. So there may be things that I don't remember were asked, and so maybe there's some duplicates, but there should be quite a bit less duplicates. I'm going to split these up into two sections so you can skip around if you want to. There are bookish questions and there are personal questions. So if you're only interested in the books or you're not as interested in the books, although this is a booktube channel, so I would assume you're probably pretty interested in the books, I will have timestamps in the description so that way you can skip around. Let's start with bookish questions. So the first question is, what is the book that made you an avid reader? And I'm not really sure I have a total answer for this because my parents were reading to me like from the point, probably from being a baby. Like, they read to me all the time, both of them. And so I have been reading all the time, literally as long as I can remember. My mom actually taught me to read before I even started kindergarten. So I've been reading for a really long time. Some of the books that I remember being like really making me love to read when I was really tiny is Dr. Seuss books. And throughout my life, I have had different favorite Dr. Seuss books in different stages. But the first book that I can remember really being a favorite that I would go and get from the library every single chance I could is The Butter Battle. And I don't know why that one was such a favorite, but it is, and it makes some really interesting statements about war, actually. So it's kind of funny that 3- and 4-year-old Tiffany loved this book so very much. Piggybacking off that question is, what were your childhood favorite reads? And I had, again, quite a few, but I would say like my mainstays that I kept reading over and over again and kept coming back to would probably be The Babysitter's Club. I know that's not very literary, but I was obsessed with The Babysitter's Club. And I also love Nancy Drew. Nancy Drew is actually the books that I can remember, like the first ones that I would like stay up super late. Everyone else was in the house sleeping and I would be like under my cover with a flashlight staying up and reading because I just had to know what happened next. And so Nancy Drew's really high up there. And then also the Ramona books. I loved those. Moving on to favorite villain in a book. And I had a really hard time with this one because I feel like there are so many options you could go with. There are very traditional villains and then slightly less traditional villains. So I'm going to go with a villain that has really stuck with me and that I really liked at first and liked to hate and then like really, really, really hated. And that's Mr. Pecksniff from Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens. Oh my word. The beginning of this book, he's so funny. He's incredibly self-righteous and virtue signaling all the time to the point of pure ridiculousness, and that I just couldn't help but laugh at him. But as the book progresses, he just gets more and more despicable the more you get to know him. And so he has stuck with me over the years, and Dickens writes some pretty dang good villains, but I think Mr. Pecksniff might be one of the best. The next question is a super fun one, especially because it involves my daughter, and it asks what my favorite character in the Keeper of the Lost City series is and if my daughter's favorite character is the same. And so I already knew as soon as I read this question that my favorite character is Keith. I love him. I think he's funny. I think he's nuanced, and I think he has had the best character development of anyone else in this series. I feel like Shannon Messenger has really gone deep into his character and some of his childhood trauma, and we've gotten more of a glimpse at that kind of stuff and seeing him grow and change as a person than we have of anyone else. I think even her character development of him is far better than her character development of Sophie. And so I just love Keith, and I was pretty sure that that was my daughter's favorite character as well. So I went and asked her, and sure enough, Keith is her favorite as well. We talk all the time that we are rooting for Keith in a lot of ways. The next question is your favorite genre to read. And I would say classic literature, although classic literature can mean many different things to many different people, can span many different time periods, be in different countries. So there's a lot of different ways that you can classify that. But I am such a huge fan of classic literature. And if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that for sure. But my favorite, I would say more specific genres within classic literature would be Victorian literature and Russian literature. I just can't get enough of either of those. This next question is actually a couple questions kind of together, and I'm just going to read the whole thing because it all goes together. I could make a whole video just off this, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to. It says, how would you say newer books fare against classics? Have you read any that would rank above your favorite classics? And if you had to choose between new books or classics, what would you pick? So this is a really interesting question because I have actually read a lot of new releases this year, for me anyway. I mean, it's not like I've read every new release, but I have read quite a few books that have been published in 2022 this year. And for most of them, I've been fairly disappointed, I'm very sad to say. And so I think that overall, I would rather read classics, and here's why. It's not just because they're older or whatever, but they've kind of stood the test of time and they've been vetted. I'm sure that there were many, many, many books that came out during the Victorian time period that weren't very good and didn't stand up. So this is not to say that there is anything wrong with new releases and that there aren't any good new releases out there, because I bet you that there are. I just feel like I haven't really found them this year. So I think that maybe possibly I am reading the wrong genres in new releases. I think that that is part of the problem. I haven't tried to read any literary fiction or anything like that. I have just read like contemporaries and mysteries for the most part, and a couple of middle grades, and I just overall just found them pretty disappointing. That being said, there are newer books that have come out, and by newer books I mean last 5 to 10 years, that I would say I have enjoyed as much as some classics that I have read. But if I were to sit down and try to figure out my top 10 favorite books of all time, which how am I supposed to do that? I've never tried to do that. But if I were to do that, I'm pretty sure that all 10 of them would be classics. But there are books that I have absolutely loved that would rank higher than quite a few classics that I have read, if that makes sense. The next question is a favorite book that both you and your daughter have read. And I don't know if this means a book that we have both read and talked about, or books that we have read together. So I kind of interpret it as like books we've read together, because there's a lot of books that I have read out loud to her over the years, and we've done family read alouds, and then there are always books that she's reading for school that I am reading aloud to her. And it's hard to say what our actual favorite is. I would say the favorite book that just the two of us have read together, at least for me, is The Secret Garden. That was probably my very favorite childhood read. I don't know why I didn't include that in my question earlier, actually, because I read that book over and over and over again as a kid, and I loved it so much. So I would say that for me, being able to introduce her to that and read that to her was so special. But there are some family reads that we've read together that have just been so wonderful. One of those is Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, which is the sequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We loved Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but my husband and I in particular were not prepared for the level of humor in Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. And we were laughing so hard that like I had to stop reading at certain points in that book. And so that I would say is a favorite, but probably our very favorite family read that we've ever read together would probably be The Hobbit. And it's just, oh my gosh, that was so fun to read together. I really want to read Lord of the Rings books as a family at some point. We did listen to The Fellowship of the Ring together this year when we were road tripping, but we haven't gone any farther than that. And we did introduce my daughter to the movies this year, although we still haven't watched Return of the King. We've watched the first two. But The Hobbit is just, it was special to read that together. And it's one that my daughter's gone back to over and over again. In fact, last year we had a literature fair as part of our homeschool group, and the book that she chose to do her presentation on was The Hobbit. Okay, this is the last bookish question, and I saved probably the most interesting bookish question for last, and it's, if you could have any two Russian authors co-author a book, who would it be and why? And oh my goodness, what a question. What an interesting question. I've thought about this, and I still don't know if I am making the right decision here. There's still quite a few Russian authors that I have not yet read. I haven't read any Turgenev, and I haven't read any Chekhov yet. So there are people that I for sure have not read. And so this is a difficult decision, but I think that maybe I would say Dostoevsky for sure. And I know that any of you who know my taste in Russian literature are not at all surprised by that, because he's one of my favorite authors of all time. But I think I would maybe do Dostoevsky and Gogol, because I think that that would take the satire and the humor over the top. And so I think I would go with those two. Okay, now we're gonna head into the personal questions. So the first question is, do you have siblings? Yes, I do. I have an older sister and a younger sister. So I am the middle child, but it's really interesting because I love talking about and studying different psychological tests and components and stuff. And so birth order is a really fun thing to talk about when you are figuring out someone's personality. But my older sister is 8 years older than me, and she moved out when I was 10, right when she turned 18. And so I was the oldest child at home from ages 10 until I moved out when I was 19. And so I have a lot of middle child traits, but I also have some oldest child traits. And so it's really interesting. I feel like I'm just like this mixed bag of personality things where I don't necessarily fit neatly into either category. And so I just think that that is fascinating to look into that kind of stuff. I also had some people ask, speaking of personality stuff, about my Enneagram number and my Myers-Briggs. And I can't really give you too much about Myers-Briggs stuff because I have taken that test so many times and I have gotten a different result every single time I've taken it, which is weird. And I'm not really sure which one I am, because I answer some of the questions differently just depending on how my mental health is, how I'm feeling that day mood-wise. And so I think because I answer some of the questions differently, it's turning out different. And I have taken the test that I think is actually on their website. So it's not like I'm taking different tests and getting different results. I've taken the same test every single time. It's really weird. But my Enneagram type is, I am an Enneagram 2, and I have a very strong one wing. So I am very definitely an Enneagram 2, but it took me a while to figure that out. I had to do a lot of research because I wasn't sure if I was a 2 or if I was a 6, and figuring out what my wings were made a really big difference in that. And I have a lot of 1 traits, especially the very strong like moral compass part of it. So I think that that helps me determine. The next question is, what is your favorite place that you have traveled? And I have not really done any international traveling, really. I've been to Canada and I've been to the Bahamas, and that's it. And the Bahamas are owned by the United States, so technically it wasn't international, but you get the idea. So most of my traveling has been within the United States. And I think that one of my favorite trips that I have taken in recent years would probably be Galveston, Texas. Peter has an aunt and an uncle who live there, and a few years ago we went there to visit and stayed with them, and we got to see a lot of just the really cool historical stuff in Galveston, including stuff about like the Galveston flood that happened in the year 1900, like with the hurricane and everything. And so that was really cool to see all the historical stuff, and it's just a beautiful place. I think we went around Easter time, so the weather was amazing and it wasn't super hot. It was beautiful. We walked to the beach every single day. It was just really wonderful. I really enjoyed visiting there. Next question is, if you could travel anywhere, where would you go? And I think this actually might have been asked in my last video now that I'm thinking about it, but I'm gonna go ahead and answer it because I realized it while I was asking the question. So if I could go anywhere in the world, I would go to Italy. I think, well, if I could really do anything, I would take like a tour of Europe so that way I could see lots of things in Europe, but Italy is the place that I would want to go more than anywhere else. I think it's beautiful. There's so much historical things there that I would love to see, so much art, so much biblical history that took place in Rome and stuff. And so it would just be really cool to check out all that stuff. The next question is a super fun one as we are coming into the holidays, and it's, what is my favorite Christmas tradition? We have a lot of traditions that we have had throughout the years and continue to have, but I think one of my favorites is at some point in December, I'll make homemade pizza and I'll make it in the shape of something Christmassy. So one will probably be like a snowman and another one might be a Christmas tree or a candy cane or something like that. And I'll make homemade pizza and we'll watch a Christmas movie with it. The next question is, what is your favorite kind of food? And hands down, Indian food. I love Indian food so much. I really love any Asian food, but if I'm narrowing it down, it probably would be Indian food. The next question is, what is your favorite animal? And that would be a capybara. I love them. I just kind of discovered them when Claire was a baby. We went to a zoo and we saw one there and I was like, what is that? What is that? I just think that they are adorable. They're basically like giant guinea pigs. They're the world's largest rodent, and I want one as a pet and I want to ride one everywhere I go. The next question is, what is your favorite magical creature and why? And when I was formulating an answer for this, the first thing I thought was just like a mythological creature. So I was like, oh, probably a hobbit. And then I was like, wait, it says magical. So that obviously changes my answer just a little bit, although you could argue that hobbits are pretty magical, but they don't have any magical like abilities and they are kind of humanoid. They're not exactly a creature, but still, I love magical creatures that fly. So obviously that would include dragons, but I think griffins are pretty dang cool too. And then I also love magical creatures from other cultures. Right now I am watching a K-drama with my friend Christy called Tale of the Nine-Tailed, and it's about nine-tailed foxes, which is a huge thing in Korean mythology and folklore. And so I just find that super fascinating. And so I think nine-tailed foxes are pretty dang cool too. The next question is super interesting, and it's, what is your favorite way to relax? All the details from a sensory point of view, all 5 senses, if you can. And I've had people ask me before, you know, what do you like to do to relax? And, you know, reading obviously comes to mind, but I love how detailed this question is, asking for like, how do you relax in a sensory way? And so if I'm going to talk about, reading is my first thing. I have 2 things that I'm going to talk about. Reading is probably my number 1 way to relax, but in a sensory point of view, reading, and I love to have an ambiance room on that has like a fireplace and maybe like rain sounds too. I love that. I think that's so relaxing, and having a hot cup of tea. So I'm holding and like feeling the warmth of the tea and tasting it. So those are those 2 senses. I am seeing the ambiance room and also the book that I'm reading, and I'm hearing the sounds. So I think that that's all the senses. Oh, I'd be smelling the tea as well. So that is one way that I love to relax. It's just so cozy. The other way is less cozy, but also a great way to relax, and that's hiking. I love to hike. I love to hear the nature sounds when I'm out hiking. I love to hike in the fall and hear the crunch of the leaves under my feet, hear birds, hear water if there's water nearby, smelling like the crisp air and feeling like the cold air on my skin. Seeing nature, especially if I'm hiking near water like a lake or river or waterfall. I prefer to hike near water just because it is prettier to look at. So yeah, I would say that those are my two favorite ways to relax. And the last question is, what are my current favorite K-pop songs? Which is so fun that someone asked me this because it's been a little while since I've talked about K-pop on my channel. If you know me in real life, you know that I love all things Korean. I love K-pop. I love K-dramas. I love the Korean language and I love the Korean culture, and I would love to visit there someday. Actually, maybe I should put that if I could travel anywhere. I might rather go to South Korea, maybe. I don't know. So my current favorite songs as of this moment, I have been really into Twice's new album, Between 1 and 2, and just about any song off of there is a favorite song. I would say Basics and When We Were Kids are not favorites, although I like them both. But the favorites for the other ones just change depending on what day it is. So any of those, I think, count as a favorite. And then also, we have recently discovered ENHYPEN, and I love them. They are so fun. We love their music videos, we love their songs, and I think that they're my daughter's favorite right now. Well, them and Twice, I guess. They've kind of passed BTS up for a little bit for her, and I love BTS still. They're probably still like my favorite, but I'm listening to more ENHYPEN and Twice, and my favorite ENHYPEN songs are Polaroid Love, and I think it's Future Perfect, which is like Past the Mic, but my daughter's favorite is Tamed Dashed. So I hear that one more than all the other ones because that's her favorite, and then also Touchdown by Twice. Those are her two favorite songs right now. So those are the songs that I hear more than all the other ones, but the ones that I've mentioned are the ones that are my actual favorites. So there you go. That is the Q&A for 1,000 subscribers. Thank you so much to every single one of you who submitted questions, and extra thank you to every single one of you who have subscribed. It was so exciting to hit that 1,000 marker, and to see that just felt wonderful and exciting, and I'm very thankful for every single one of you. And I wanted to record this video the week of Thanksgiving because I am so thankful for every single one of you and all our bookish chats, and so many of you have become really close friends as well, and I'm just really thankful for this community. So thank you so much for watching, and if you're not subscribed, I would love it if you would, so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.